We've been studying hubs at 2020 Plus for a few years now, starting with Seattle, once a hub for aeronautical design, then for computers and digital, now for green technologies. We studied Eindhoven in the Netherlands. Most of you probably never heard of Eindhoven. It's only a small place, but hub status has nothing to do with size and everything to do with culture. Eindhoven attracts 4 billion euros, ladies and gentlemen, in venture capital every year to technology. We studied Zelonograd in Russia, just outside of Moscow. Used to be called the Soviet Silicon Valley, a place that offers generous tax rates to start-up businesses in certain areas of technology. And we studied Cambridge, the so-called Silicon Fen, where 25% of all jobs go into 900 high-tech companies. This is a region that attracts 25% of all UK venture capital. This one relatively small place, 120,000 people, attracts a quarter of all venture capital in the UK. And it all started in the 1970s with an alliance between the Cambridge University and industry to form the Cambridge Research Park. Now, these and other hubs that we've looked at over the last 3 years have certain characteristics in common, and it's interesting to me to see how Berlin matches up. First of all, there's a focus on specialized areas of technology. A deliberate strategic focus. These are the areas we will invest in. In the McKinsey report last year, which I know most of you are familiar with, it identified 3 clusters already happening in Berlin, which I think are clear focuses for the future too. First is, of course, digital technology, things like e-commerce, online services, gaming, software development, big data apps, and so on. 85% of all new jobs in these 3 clusters are within digital technology, so that's obviously a major focus. Biomedical technologies, I mentioned, slightly smaller. Urban technologies such as electronics, mobility, according to McKinsey, in need of a little bit of investment. Second focus for hubs is digital communication. Fast, broadband, easy access to same. In Berlin, we have a mixed story here because the German telecommunications regulator last year found that only half of you are getting 50% of the advertised broadband speed. How many say, yeah, that's true? We have the same problem in many parts of Europe, by the way. And yet, in Berlin, we're attracting companies like Rocket Internet, which is the world's largest venture capital outfit focusing on e-commerce. The third characteristic of hub is rents and rates, that is infrastructure for housing and land. And a challenge here in Berlin with the housing front, in that housing costs have increased 8% since 2010. That's more than any other German city. For obvious reasons, lots of people want to live here, and it's not hard to see why. We also see the city becoming more international and internationalized and more cosmopolitan. And so in 2012 alone, 5 million accommodation nights were given over to tourists. So a lot more private apartments are becoming holiday apartments. That's more than doubled in the last 8 years. Alliances are an important part of hub status. The willingness of universities to build alliances with business, for example, private and public sector working together. Innovative, friendly administration, that is a lack of red tape, and generous funding for startups. That's another focus of hubs. Thankfully in Berlin, we've got companies like Coca-Cola, Deutsche Telekom, Microsoft, coming together to form labs, build labs that develop the startup culture and that support that culture. That's a good thing. On the not so good side, we still have a lot of bureaucracy, as we do in much of Europe, with things like visa applications, accommodation, work permits. It makes it a little difficult for new people at times to come into the city. How many are looking forward to the new Brandenburg airport whenever it arrives? I certainly am. I love coming to Berlin, but I'm not so sure about the airport. I'm looking forward to that new airport. It will add to your city something like, they say, 40,000 jobs. So travel into the city and out of the city is a big part of hub status worldwide. And the final one, and probably the most important, is a trained workforce and a high rate of graduate retention. And in the McKinsey report, it noted that whilst we have 4 universities, 7 universities of applied science, 70 research institutes in Berlin, the founding of new initiatives is still really low, or relatively low, for the number of universities, because there's a lack of institutional incentives. There's a lack of official funding, for example, to assist with startups. So that last point is really important, because despite the fact that Berlin has come an awfully long way in the last 15 years, you can see it even just driving through the city, there is still, in the studies we've been seeing, a type of thinking among younger people in particular that says personal growth, risk, experimentation, daring are things that happen somewhere else. It's important we address that, because the future is not about technology alone. Or as I say, technology is not destiny. We are not a product in the future of the techs we will use. We are a product, of course, of how we choose to engage with those technologies. Are we agreed? It's human choice that more than anything else will shape human future. And a number of studies now are suggesting that one of the big impacts on choice is generational mindset or worldview.